Hey everybody, what's good? What's going on? Looks like there we go. It was a little bit out of focus there. Hey, hope everybody's doing good. Welcome back to another CyberInsight live stream. Today is going to be a really helpful topic for those who are interested in learning a little bit about Active Directory. So as we kind of have been continuing down this path of doing all these different TryHackMe Pentest Plus uh, rooms that kind of align with the different objectives in the certification, I wanted to take a look at the group of rooms that they have dealing with Windows stuff. And the first room that comes along with that is one that covers kind of a high level breakdown of the different components of Active Directory. So this video is going to be super useful to you, even if you aren't involved in pen testing or want to get into red team stuff. If you just want to understand a little bit more about Active Directory, so maybe you're looking to get a job on service desk or help desk, maybe you want to become a systems engineer, maybe you work with some other facet of IT operations, but you have to work with Windows folks, might make a little bit of sense to kind of pick up some of this knowledge, and that way we're all kind of using the same nomenclature and understand how things kind of work. So before we hop in over into the lab room, as always, if you have any questions or comments, throw those in the chat box in the comment section, and we'll hit those up as we go through there. And make sure you smash the like and subscribe button and all that good stuff. So yeah, let's just hop over into it from there. Let me also just make sure that we have that got some comments coming in already. Hey, everybody. Oh, man, Anonymous is in here too. Well, since we kind of already found out who that is, I guess we'll kind of just keep that a secret for those who haven't seen that chat over on Davin's channel. Let me throw these up real quick before we jump in. Hey, Kiki, what's good? Let's see. A few more coming in. Awesome, appreciate that. What is going on? Let me drop that in there. All right, so a little bit about how this room is going to help us moving forward into the other labs. So I think that there are 4 other Active Directory rooms, and I think this is really going to lay out the foundation for understanding the basic services that reside within Active Directory, which will then allow us to use other types of tool sets to enumerate information and then later on attack it. We aren't doing any of that in this room. This is kind of just setting everything up as a baseline goes. If you watched any of the other videos where we did the network services rooms, I think again there was like 4 or 5 rooms there, and there was an initial one where it was kind of just an overview of networking. And so that's pretty much what this one is going to be. There is a little tiny lab at the end where we're going to do some PowerShell stuff, but I mean really basic stuff, which is good because I suck at PowerShell, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to get better at PowerShell. So let's take a look and kind of I'll walk through this, kind of give you a few tidbits of what I think, in addition to this from my experience working with Active Directory stuff. So if you don't know what Active Directory is, it's a directory service that runs within Windows environments. And really, we see it in a few different ways. So when I say directory service, pretty much you're creating different types of computers, user accounts, service accounts, and it ties everything together so that you can have an account that's assigned to you and an email address and all those types of things. And you can log on to pretty much, any type of device that you have permissions to log on to within the environment. It makes management and logging and auditing of users and services within a Windows environment centralized and a lot easier to do than if you had to create individual accounts for every single user in your environment on all of the different types of devices. That would suck. I've been in some environments like that before. It's not it's not pretty. It's not a lot of fun. let's see. So what are we going to be hitting up in this today? So a few different things. We're talking about domain controllers. Those are kind of going to be the main servers that are used to kind of manage and monitor all of this. We're going to be talking about forest trees and domains. Those are kind of like Russian nesting dolls when it comes to looking at an Active Directory environment. And kind of, we'll talk about how they all kind of build on top of each other. Users and groups, I just mentioned, you're a person within an organization. You are a user, you need an account to be able to do things. One of the cool things that we're able to do with Active Directory, both from a functional standpoint and a security standpoint, is we can take these different types of accounts, whether or not it's actually associated with a user or associated with different types of servers or machines, and put them into different groups. The reason why that is super helpful and useful is because we can then go ahead and create different types of policies to apply different types of controls or permissions or any type of unique configurations that we want to just have a specific group of things be able to do or have access to. So when it comes to securing Windows environments, group policies is, what we use a lot to be able to do that. And it's very, very helpful, especially when you're trying to secure a whole bunch of different devices. Let's say you have 1,000 different devices in your environment. If you use group policies, you can set that once and it pushes out to all of the specific devices that you want those rules attached to. So very, very helpful. Trusts, we're going to hit on that a little bit. Trusts, from my experience, has been when you have different types of domains, separate domains, or even separate forests, and you want to have some type of agreement between those to allow users in one environment to be able to access data in another, or vice versa. Kind of already talked a little about policies. And then domain services. So we're kind of talking about, the ability to, how do I want to put this? The ability to have a centralized authentication mechanism. There are other types of domain services that get tied to Active Directory, and I expect that we are going to be hitting on that a little bit more. Some things just off the top of my head that kind of would integrate with this would be things like DNS or email exchange services or other types of file services, things like that. All right, so what are they talking about here? Why use Active Directory? Well, it's pretty much used everywhere. And as I said, being able to have a single user sign on to any computer in the Active Directory network and be able to access their files from that machine is very powerful. And I think that pretty much covers the gist of all of that stuff. So we'll go ahead and mark that as completed. All right, so physical Active Directory. Let's see what they got going on here. So this is, if we're talking about physical Active Directory, we're actually talking about on-premise servers, so not necessarily Azure and cloud-based types of services. And different types of servers that we have that can be connected to Active Directory. Domain controllers, which we're going to hit on, storage servers, file servers, print servers, email servers, web servers, database servers. Pretty much anything that you can think of that's a server can connect back to Active Directory one way or another. You can also integrate Linux into that in some ways. You can also integrate networking devices into that in certain ways as well, depending upon the types of services that you're using. So for instance, if you're using something like TACACS, you can have your user accounts in a specific group for network engineers that's managed within Active Directory. And then you have a TACACS server, which is going to use a domain controller and Active Directory as an external identity source. And you're kind of able to tie that all together so that when a network engineer goes to log into a firewall, you can check to see if their account is a member of the firewall OU within Active Directory, and if it is, then they will be able to have access to that firewall and other networking devices that you've given them permission to. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty robust, and you can do a lot of things with that. So domain controller is really going to be the Windows server that's running the Active Directory domain services, or ADDS. If you just have a regular Windows server, it is not a domain controller. It actually needs to be promoted into that role. Let's see, domain controllers are the center of Active Directory and control the rest of the domain. So it's going to hold the ADDS data store, and we're going to talk about what that is. That's pretty much going to be all of the information and credentials for the different users, groups, and services. The domain controller is going to be the central point that handles the authentication and authorization of services. It replicates any type of configuration changes to other domain controllers within your Forrest. And we're going to talk about what a Forrest is here in a little bit. And that also comes back to where I was talking before about policies and things like that. If you update that on one domain controller, the cool thing with that is it syncs that to the rest of the domain controllers that are in that domain. Likewise, if you create a user account on one domain controller within Active Directory, then that's going to sync that to the rest of the domain controllers as well. So once you make a change in one location, it pretty much will push it out to the rest of the domain controllers that it's aware of. Let's see, so the ADDS data store. As I mentioned, it holds a database and processes the need to store and manage directory information, so your users, your services, your groups. And here are some of the main contents and characteristics of the ADDS data store. It contains the NTDS.dit. This is a database that contains all the information for Active Directory, as well as the password hashes for domain users. Now, we aren't really going into the hacking aspect of this in this particular room, but as we move into the other rooms, you will see NTDS.dit come up quite a bit. This is one of those things that if an attacker is trying to be able to get credentials in the environment, if they are able to get to this, pull it down, and then be able to run some tools to try to crack the password hashes, then this is kind of like the jewels in the kingdom, for lack of a better term. It's also important why you want to have very complex and long passwords, because then that makes the hash super, super hard to crack. Let's see, anything else? The NTDS.dit is stored under system root, so maybe the C drive and then NTDS. And it's accessible only by the domain controller. So you have to get kind of cute with that if you are trying to actually pull that off the domain controller. Which is, again, why it's important to have physical security with your physical domain controllers. Because sometimes certain red teamers might just run in and grab the domain controller and run out the front door. I think TinkerSec did that a while ago. I think that was a Twitter story that he went through where he was talking about where he was on a pen test and was able to identify the domain controller. There was no physical security, and he just pulled it, threw it under his arm, which would have been hilarious to see, and ran out of the building, and then started doing whatever he needed to do, since he had physical access to the drive, to be able to try to crack the hashes within that. So all right, to the questions here. What database does the ADDS contain? Well, we just said NTDS. No, NTDS.dit. Cool. All right, where is that stored? And we already saw that right here. System root, NTDS. And what type of machine can a domain controller be? I think that we are talking about Windows Server, maybe? There we go. Cool. All right, got some more comments coming in. I'll throw that up real quick. Group policy is life in AD, for sure. Very, very, very important. All right. We can move on to the next one. So we're going to talk a little bit about forests. So the forest is what defines everything, kind of container for all of the different things within Active Directory. Without the forest, all the other trees and domains would not be able to interact. And this is kind of something, at least for me, that is always interesting to look at, because you see within this forest here, you kind of have a few different domains. You might even call them subdomains, maybe. So I guess if you don't have multiple domains within your forest, you just have one domain, it still would be considered a forest, even though you don't have multiple domains in there. I think I'm talking in circles there, but wanted to work through that in my mind for a second. Let's see. And the one thing to note, forest is not to think of it too literally. Yeah, okay. That's obvious. Let's see. So a collection of one or more domain trees inside of Active Directory network. And it's what categorizes the parts of the network as a whole. So a few of the things that kind of go into a forest: trees is a hierarchy of domains in ADDS. A domain is just a group of, or is used to group and manage different types of objects. We talked about those objects up above: users, computers, service accounts. OUs, or organizational units, are containers where we can put different types of things, whether they're groups, computers, printers, users. We can nest OUs within inside of other OUs. And this is normally where you're going to see, if you're trying to be very specific with your GPOs, you can sometimes see GPOs attached to specific OUs. Trusts allow user to access resources in other domains. And there are different types of trusts. I don't know how deep they're going to go into that, but you can have transitive trusts where both domains trust each other, non-transitive trusts, one-way trusts. That could be something where me being in one company, I'm trusted to be able to log into resources in another, but that other company isn't allowed to log into my stuff. A whole bunch of different ways that you can do that. And sometimes those trusts can get a little bit messy, and that's why you want to have good Windows and Active Directory engineers to be able to handle all of that stuff. Let's see, objects, we kind of talked about that: users, printers, computers, file shares, groups. Domain services, kind of talked about a few of these different things before. We were talking about, maybe Exchange or DNS servers. Here they have a few other things. And domain schema is the rules for object creation. All right, so let's hit these up. What is the term for hierarchy of domains in a network? So I think here we are talking about a tree. Okay. What is a term What is the term for the rules for object creation? Domain schema. And what is a term for containers, for groups, computers, users, printers, and other OUs? Organizational units. All right. Now we're going to move into users and groups. Any questions so far before we hop into that? All right. Users and groups. They reside within AD. When you create a domain controller, it comes with default groups and 2 default users: administrator and guest. Now, man, we could we could do a whole video on best practices with what to do with those. Disable guest. End up doing something else with your administrator. I'm trying to remember if you can rename that or not. You might. I think you can. And use laps on your local account, so that way it's always changing, periodic intervals. So It will be unique between all of the different Windows boxes in your environment, and changes periodically. Makes it a little bit harder for an attacker to be able to get your local admin credentials, and yeah, just it makes it a little bit more of a challenge. Okay. Users are the core to Active Directory. Without users, why have Active Directory in the first place? That's what I kind of was mentioning, is across your entire environment, you're going to have a user count associated with individuals, easier to sign in and do different types of services. So a few different types of users within the environment. Domain admins, pretty much they can do anything within the environment. You want to be very specific about who you give these credentials to. You want to limit who actually gets those. Even better than that, you can create other types of groups with certain accounts to be able to do service desk or help desk types of things, account resets, being able to log into stuff with a remote desktop, things like that. You want to try to separate those roles out a little bit. So that way you aren't just giving everybody domain admins, because then that can be really messy. And then, even stepping back further than that, if you work in an environment where everybody, all users get domain admins, I don't know. You probably need to break out some candles and some incense and some prayers, because that's going to get pretty, that can go sideways real quick. Service accounts. Service accounts are normally used with different types of applications and services to be able to do different things within Active Directory. So for instance, let's say you had a monitoring tool that needed to sync with Active Directory so that you could log on to that tool using an AD account. A service account is going to be an account that you're going to create that you're going to use within that application to be able to query Active Directory to make sure that whenever someone logs in with an account, they're able to actually authenticate. With service accounts, you want to be very, very granular and specific. You don't want to give them too many permissions, or more permissions than what they really need to be able to get the job done for whatever the service or application is that they're interacting with. Local administrators, as I said, that is on the local machines. You want to be careful with those. You want to rename those, use laps. There's a whole bunch of other security best practices that you would follow with those. They cannot log on to the domain, which is good. But if they are able to be compromised on the local machine, then they can end up installing other things, and then it becomes a bit of a slippery hill, a slippery slope, I should say, as far as what happens once a local administrator account has been compromised. So not good. And then domain users, these are going to be your everyday folks that don't have any type of administrative credentials or permissions, and that's good. You want to be, again, as granular with any types of permissions that you need to do. And if you have different types of users that have different requirements for permissions above what normally comes with domain users, you would, again, want to create some type of group and OU for that, and give those specific permissions to users within that group. And look at that, we're actually going to talk about groups. Okay, groups make it easier to give permissions to users and objects by organizing them into groups with specific permissions. I swear I just said that. Two different types of Active Directory groups. You got security groups, specify permissions, and distribution groups. These are used to specify email distribution lists, right? So you might, see that within Exchange. If you and a group of friends want to create a specific group and an email address for that, then you can go ahead and do something like that. Default security groups. There is a lot to this. and all of the different things that come into that. I'm not necessarily going to read through all of these, but just from looking at this, you should understand that each of these all has kind of different permissions to be able to do different things. Monitoring these or specific groups within these is very important from a security perspective. Yeah, if you want to know a little bit more about default security groups, spend a little bit more time digging into these. All right. What types of groups specify user permissions? We said that was security groups. All right. Which group contains all workstations and servers joined to the domain? All workstations and servers joined to the domain is domain computers. Now, again, with like that type of group, maybe you want to make different types of groups depending upon different types of servers that you have. You can get more granular that way and then apply specific permissions to those specific server groups. Which group can publish certificates to the directory? Cert publishers. Which user can make changes to a local machine but not to a domain controller? Well, we were already talking about local administrators. And we'll see if that's administrator or administrators. Cool. Which group has their passwords replicated to read-only domain controllers? Read-only domain controllers? Maybe? Let's see. Nope. Let's see. Oh, right there. Allowed read-only domain controllers password replication group. Let's try that. There we go. All right, trust and policies. Let's see. Got a few other comments coming. I'll throw those up. Stig's made us change the default name on all of our networks. As you should. As you should. Let's see. They always give the answer. I know. I always forget about that. They're very specific with the information they put in there. They want you to succeed, which is nice. All right, trust and policies go hand in hand to help the domain and trees communicate with each other, maintain security inside the network. Let's see. They put rules in place of how domains inside a forest can interact with each other, how external forests can interact with a forest, and the overall domain rules, policies a domain must follow. So we were kind of talking about the example before of you work for one company, it has some type of trust with another company, and you're able to access stuff within their environment. And that's kind of what this is looking like here. Within the forest, you have these three domains. They have trusts with each other. There's an external domain outside of the forest that is able to access the forest and this domain, or it could be all of them, depending on how you have it set up. And trusts outline the way that domains inside the forest communicate with each other. And in some environments, trust can be extended to external domains and even forests in that case. Oh, and I was talking about this above too. Directional and transitive. So two types of trust to determine how domains communicate. Directional, the direction of the trust flows from a trusting domain to a trusted domain. And transitive, the trust relationship expands beyond just two domains to include other trusted domains. Types of trust put in place determines how the domains and the trees in the forest are able to communicate, send data back and forth. Yep. And then domain policies. we were talking about how this is a super important part of Active Directory. Kiki mentioned that as well. Dictate how a server operates, what rules it will apply. So interesting thing that they don't mention here, but is worth understanding from a Active Directory perspective, is the order of precedence for how policies are applied within a domain. So I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think it is local first, and then site, and then domain, and then OU, right? Yes, that sounds right. So things will go in that order as far as things being applied on the machine, and whichever of those in that order has a setting is the last one that's applied. So that's why when we're talking about implementing GPOs with and doing it to specific OUs, that's kind of the most important one out of that, since that's the last one that's looked at. And so that's where you normally want to apply your settings to make sure that they aren't overwritten someplace else. If you end up doing it, let's say you put in a local security policy, which you can do that on any Windows machine. There's a local security policy, you go in and change whatever you want that to be. As long as it's a member of the domain and still has connections to that, whatever GPOs are out there are going to be pushed to it. And if that same setting contradicts with something that's set at the domain level or at the OU level, then that OU level one, for instance, is going to overwrite whatever the local security policy is. So kind of important to understand the hierarchy of that and how all of that kind of plays out. Let's see. Simply act as rules for Active Directory. That's what we were kind of talking about. Along the list of default domain policies, domain admins can choose their own policies not already on the domain controller. And again, this comes back to whether or not you want to do specific GPOs on specific types or groups of servers. Lots of different things that you can do with those. They're giving some examples of things. You can disable Windows Defender, digitally sign communications. I mean, anything that you can think of within Active Directory as far as different types of, or not even Active Directory, but within a Windows environment, as far as different types of services and configurations, you can pretty much do that within a GPO. You can also push out different types of scripts. You can change different registry settings. These can all be tied back to GPOs that, again, can be tied back to specific OUs. So pretty robust. All right, question. What type of trust flows from a trusting domain to a trusted domain? We were talking about directional. All right. And then what type of trust expands to include other trusted domains? Transitive. All right. Any questions so far on any of that? All right, so Active Directory domain services and authentication. We're talking about the directory services kind of being the core of what the domain controller is going to be doing within Active Directory. But there are different services that we kind of mentioned before. I mentioned DNS before. And they got a few here. So LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, provides communication between applications and directory services. So before, where I was talking about that scenario of you having an application and you needing to have a service account that would be able to query Active Directory, well, the way that it might query Active Directory, especially if it's not a Windows application, would be using a protocol called LDAP. You'll see that a lot, especially if you're using also Linux devices within the environment might be using LDAP as well for querying back to Active Directory when users are logging on there. Certificate services. Yeah, so if you're going to be running a certificate authority within your environment and you want to create, validate, revoke different types of certs, that's another type of domain service you can do. Other types of naming services, you see covered here, DNS being the one that you're probably most familiar with. Domain authentication overview. Two types of main authentication in place for Active Directory, NTLM and Kerberos. I think that we're going to be hitting that up a little bit more within those rooms, and they'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into that, Kerberos, and all of your ticket granting tickets and ticket granting servers, and kind of how all of that goes back and forth. And NTLM and the different versions of NTLM and the ones that are vulnerable and all that type of stuff. I'm sure we are going to hit up a lot more in those other rooms. So I'm not going to go too much into that here, except kind of what they're covering here. So Kerberos' default authentication service for AD uses, I just mentioned that, ticket granting tickets and service tickets to authenticate users and give them access to different types of domains. So it's kind of like this process where you as a user, you log in and you get the ability to request different things. And then depending upon the permissions that you have, you take your ticket to be able to request things to actually then go and request the ability to interact with a service, and then you get a ticket back from that particular service, and that allows you to be able to do whatever it is you need to do for a certain period of time. This goes back again to something that we hit on a lot before, and that is the importance of timing within your environments and why NTP is so important. Because if your timing is off, all of this stuff goes to shit. So make sure that your timing is good. And then NTLM is a default Windows authentication protocol used for encrypted challenge and response protocol. Don't use NTLM version 1, and there's certain versions of NTLM version 2, which I think, depending upon the responses that it has, can get you in a bit of trouble as well. So I'm sure, like I said, we are going to cover those a lot more in some other rooms. All right. What type of authentication uses tickets? Well, we were just talking Kerberos. And what domain service can create, validate, or revoke public key certificates? Certificate services. All right, and now we are going to AD in the cloud, Azure AD. So this is great. We learn all this stuff, and then Microsoft takes all of it and throws it in the trash. But don't worry, everybody's going to the cloud, but maybe not. I mean, we still use AD an awful lot on-prem. So here they're going to talk a little bit about the differences. Even though they're saying that Azure Active Directory, which is totally different than your regular Microsoft on-prem Active Directory, a lot of differences. They're saying that Azure Active Directory is a bit more secure. Protect your APIs, by the way. Let's see what they have to say. So Azure acts as a middleman between your physical Active Directory and your user sign-on. This allows for more secure transactions between domains, making a lot of Active Directory attacks ineffective. So you have users going to sign on through Azure Active Directory. There's Azure AD Connect to on-prem Active Directory, and they kind of do some magic back and forth there. So the best way to show you the cloud takes security precautions past what is already provided with physical network is to show you comparison within cloud Active Directory. So instead of LDAP, they're using REST APIs. Instead of NTLM, they're using OAuth or SAML. Instead of Kerberos, OpenID. We're used to OU trees here within Azure AD. It's more of a flat structure. Domains and Forrest kind of become tenants, and trusts and guests. I know that really does not go into a great breakdown of that, but I think the main point here to understand is Azure Active Directory can interact back with on-prem Active Directory via Azure AD Connect. There's a lot of differences between the two. You don't expect that the same things that you're doing within your domain controllers or Active Directory on-prem, you're going to be able to do in the cloud. And I think as long as you kind of have that understood, then you can start to dig a little bit more into the specific differences and the use cases that you have within your environments. I am interested to see if there is any Azure AD rooms. I didn't actually look to see if that's the case with this, but it'll be kind of interesting to see if they do have that. That might be kind of fun. All right, what is the Azure AD equivalent of LDAP? REST APIs. As I mentioned, protect your APIs. What is the Azure AD equivalent of domains in Forrest? Tenants. And what is the Windows AD equivalent of guests? Is trusts. All right, now we get to the lab portion of this. Let's take a look at what they have us doing here. So, pretty much they want us to get into this box, and we're gonna do a little bit of querying with PowerShell. I'll let you know right off the bat, I suck with PowerShell. Everything I do with PowerShell in general in my life comes from Googling. So we're going to kind of see how this goes. Might need some help, maybe. We'll see. So I already deployed the machines. We're good with that. SSH or RDP into the machine. I already gave that a test. So I'm just going to SSH in. Since we're just using the command line for this stuff, don't really need a RDP into it. So just SSH. And then we're going to take a look and see what they want us to do. So we're going to go to the downloads, navigate to the directory PowerView is in, which is in downloads. We're going to load PowerShell with execution policy bypassed. So we'll be able to actually do some stuff with it and import, which will be importing a PowerView module. So modules within PowerShell kind of give you the ability to do or view or interact with data in different types of ways. That's my non-Windows engineer explanation. All right, so let's see what we got here. So I am already into this here. I also made my little circle thing a little bit smaller. Some folks were mentioning how it kind of, my little video screen there was getting in the way of the text. So hopefully that's better and you won't have any issues of reading anything I type out. So we're going to SSH, as we kind of have shown before, whenever you want to use a specific username, when you're SSHing, just username @ and then the IP address. And I believe it was password 123 @. All right, so now we are in here. We were going to go CD to downloads, I think. Okay, now we're in downloads. Oh, we're going to go PowerShell EP bypass. What's that? A hyphen there. Yeah, hyphen EP. Okay, now you see that we are in PowerShell. Yep. And then we were going to import that module. So done. PowerView.ps1. Okay. So that should have taken that fine. That looks good. All right, so what do we got to do? So I'll help you with a few commands. Use the following cheat sheet. I kind of have already opened that up here. We might use some of this stuff. We might not. We might just Google throw some stuff against a wall. We'll see how it goes. You should have enough knowledge of Active Directory now to investigate the machine's internals on your own. Sure. All right. So some commands here. This is to get a list of operating systems on the domain. This is to get a list of users on the domain. And then select and CN, I think, is for common name. So that kind of brings that up. Okay. Well, there's not a lot of questions here, so we'll kind of see how this goes. What is the name of the Windows 10 operating system? So seems like this one right here will work for us. Get-netcomputer -full data pipe select operating systems. Let's see how that goes. That's not it. There we go. Let's see what we got. So they're asking which is the Windows 10, and we just have only that as an enterprise evaluation coming up as options within the environment. So we'll copy that. Move that over there. I'll try. Am I doing that incorrect? Let's see. Come on. We will just go and get that. We'll just move that over. Okay, Windows 10. There we go. Okay. What is the second admin name? So we're going to take a look. We used a get -net user. And again, like I said, we use a common name. Here, let's see. So what do we have here? So as far as options that come up here, the second one looks like it's going to be admin 2. Well, just for kicks and giggles, let's see what they give us if we don't select that. We just go get user. Then we end up getting a whole bunch of information on all of these different accounts. And so by specifying that specific attribute, then we were just able to pull all that up and make that a little bit easier to see. Okay. All right, let's go do that as admin 2. So we'll do that. 2. Now, as far as which group has a capital V in the group name, let's see if there's something here that might. I don't know if that will go to main group. I'll give that a try. No, all right, I need something a little bit more specific. Should be net local group. Okay. Well, let me get rid of that. Sorry about that. All right, so we were looking at all of the different groups, and we're looking for one that had a capital V in the name. Hyper-V administrators looks pretty good to me. So let's do that. See if that's right. Hyper-V administrators. I wonder. Okay. That's another one. That's good. And then what is a password for the, when was the password last set for the SQL service user? Now, we could use that. I'm trying to think what else. I did a little look before. I think we could go get, let's try. Get AD user. Let's see. Oh, yeah, helps when I put a hyphen in there. Get AD user identity. And it was what? MySQL? SQL service. SQL service. No, let's see. Oh, it helps when I spell identity right, doesn't it? Okay, I think we need something a little more than that. Probably missing some properties. Let's go, oh yeah, let's try properties. And we can go, I think we could specify like the password last change, but I don't know what that is off the top of my head, so I think we can just go asterisk to get all of them. There we go. Okay, and when created, when changed, password last set. There we go. Okay. So 5/13/2020, 8:26:58 p.m. Is that what all of that wants? That looks like that's what that wants. Okay. Let's see, 5/13/2020, 8:26:58 p.m. Okay. Let's give that a try. Bam! All right. That looks like that is it. Let's see if there was anything else. We've done all the basics of Active Directory. You need to know to interact inside of the network. And so that is going to set us up for those next labs. We'll take a look real quick at the lab since we're here to see what the other ones are that fall underneath that. So it's under localhost vulnerabilities. And so we have attacking Active Directory, attacking Kerberos, and post-exploitation basics. Yes, awesome. We did it. And Kiki's going to join me on one of these here next Wednesday. We haven't decided which one we're going to do yet, but we're going to do another collaboration and kind of see how that all goes. Those are pretty fun. So, yeah, so let's go back. That looks good. So, hey, appreciate everybody checking that out. Any questions before we wrap it all up? Some more comments coming in. Appreciate it. We did it. see if there's anything else that kind of came in. No, I think that was about it. Yeah, appreciate everybody sticking around. Had a decent amount of folks on the stream today, so that's always awesome. Make sure you hit the like button, share it with your friends or other folks that you know that are trying to learn a little bit about Active Directory. Hopefully it helps them out a little bit. Oh, have I done the Rick and Morty lab? No. Which one? What does it cover? I appreciate you dropping in. I'm gonna have to look up the Rick and Morty lab. Everything that I've done so far has been aligned with the Pentest Plus room, I guess, or not room, but course. So like everything that kind of fell in underneath these. So I mean, we still got to do Burp Suite. We haven't done any of the application stuff yet, so that will have a web fundamentals, kind of just like what we did with Active Directory fundamentals, where it will, you know, not be very much hands-on, but more little book learning, I guess, and then go into some web app pen testing. But I'll have to take a look. You're saying it's part of the beginner path. Well, let's hop over there real quick since we're here and kind of take a look at that. Complete beginner. Linux fundamentals, network fundamentals, we've all done that. Pickle Rick. I don't know about that. These look pretty good. Maybe some Eternal Blue? Interesting, okay. What's a shell? I'm not seeing it I'm not seeing it under here, unless I just missed it. John the Ripper. Oh, I guess that was Pickle Rick, was the Rick and Morty CTF. Okay. Let's take a look at that real quick. Rick Morty theme challenge: exploit a web server and find three ingredients that will help Rick make his potion to transform himself back into a human from a pickle. I mean, yeah, doesn't sound like a good situation. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I think once I get done with these Pentest Plus rooms, I'm gonna look at doing some of the other ones just because I think this is kind of a fun way to do some streaming content. And so whether you go complete beginner or the cyber defense, yeah, maybe just hop back and forth between those actually, because I don't know. I find this to be a lot of fun, and it's cool to get the interaction with folks, and most people say that this seems to help them a decent amount. So I think it's pretty cool. All right. If anybody else has any other comments, throw them in now. And if not, then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Remember, I said we'll have another one next Wednesday with Kiki, and I think I might do one myself this Friday, depending upon if I have any free time on Friday or not. So, all right, chat with everybody later. All right.